So I wanted to start at the beginnings of how you became a photographer. And you actually started your professional career as an architect, but you quite quickly transitioned to photography. And I was really interested, you kind of started with people, and I was interested to know what drew you to photography and why people particularly.
Well, when I was an undergraduate, I got a camera, a Pentax camera, and I took architectural shots. And I also took photographs of people, and I liked the people more than the architecture. And so I dropped out of architecture, and I'd been interested in theatre, and so I tried my hand at playwriting, but I found I couldn't pay the rent. This was in Sydney. And so I started doing headshots for actors, and that's how I began. But pretty soon I started to photograph events, whether they be social events or parties, and I felt that's when I found my stride at parties, because I used to go to parties. I like going to parties, and so I started to become a social photographer. And that led me into photographing events, and also I knew Kate Fitzpatrick from acting circles, theatre circles, and so I was able to brush with famous people. Eventually I realised that my own set of people who maybe weren't that glamorous in some ways were the people I enjoyed photographing the most, because I knew them. And I felt I identified with being part of their movement. And eventually, in the late 80s, I had a collection of transparencies, colour films, and it was quite hard to get prints of them. And so I started projecting my transparency collection just as a way of showing them. It was cheaper than prints. Very soon, or it took me about 7 years actually to work up enough photo essays or short stories where I could perform a show of image projection, music, and me talking in a small theatre. And that was 1989, where I did The Face of Buddha in the downstairs Belvoir Street Theatre. And although I lost money, it was a big success, the show. Everyone liked the format, and so I decided that I'd continue with this. And so that was the beginning of the storytelling, monologue with slide projection, whatever you'd like to call it. And so when I would also have exhibitions of the same images, I thought, well, this image has got a story. And so I immediately just wrote the story on the photograph. And that was the beginning of my writing on the image, and which I still do today.
And it's very much become your signature
Yes, absolutely.
style. Yeah. I wanted to go back just to your first exhibition, Sydney Files, that was held at the Australian Centre for Photography in 1977. And it was a collection of portraits of the Sydney social scene. And I'd really love if you could talk a little bit about that.
So Sydney Files was really my social set. It was in the thing, and they included sort of famous people like Brett White, Lee Barton Sharp, Kate Fitzpatrick, Jenny Key and Linda Jackson, and then there were my friends, people I'd met at various parties usually, and also there was the gay community, which was emerging in the 70s, which was the period of gay liberation. Taking the photographs themselves was quite tricky because a lot of people still didn't want to be identified as gay, and so that there was a lot of fear within that community of being outed. But there are also people who, from the gay community who are saying, our community has been invisible for thousands of years. Take my photo, here I am, publish it. That was probably part of its excitement. It was like the Australian gay community shown on the walls of the gallery, and some of it wasn't pretty, but it was kind of defiant.
Yeah.
And also found out with this exhibition that people loved looking at photographs of themselves. At the exhibition opening, sort of people would stand beside their portraits. But it was about people, and so people want their lives to be told, and it's a validation, really. Even if it's just as simple as I was here, or I was part of that, or this is my life, or I went here and now it's being recorded. And I think that's a very strong kind of identification, a cultural identification, really, and a validation of a life. I think the strength of my collection is that you can engage with it in a way.
And I think it's that connection, right? You know, that sort of human connection is such a big part of your work.
Yes. That I'm telling you my story. That's really, I think, the thread that runs through. Even to the landscape, it's still my story.
Yeah. And thank you so much, William, for joining me in this discussion today. And we hope it lives on in the State Library collection, the James Sourris collection, for many years to come. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rosie.